I think as always, there's the perpetual problem of what to call Taiwan and how to treat Taiwanese fans, who I think simply would love to go to the Olympics and wave their flag just like every other fan of it, every other national team gets to.
I think so far the most memorable moment, certainly from the Taiwanese perspective, is the badminton men's double with Yang and Wang Chi-Lin defeating Chinese opponent to win Taiwan's first gold medal in Paris.
As we were talking about boxer Lin Yu-ting, I think she's really shown herself to be such a dignified athlete, and to have to put up with so much nastiness from these people around the world, and to keep fighting and to keep winning, I think that's something that I think will live on for a long time.
Hello and welcome to Connected. I'm Divya Gopalan. Now, this is one of the defining images from this year's Paris Olympic Games, captured by an AFP photographer. It shows the world's top surfer, Gabriel Medina, at the men's competition in Yu-Kuei in Tahiti, nearly 16,000 kilometers away from the French capital. He won the bronze. And how about the men's 100-meter sprint finals? All 8 runners finished within 0.12 seconds of the gold medal time and under 10 seconds, making it the fastest race in history. But these Olympics are making their mark for more than just the athletes, from the controversies surrounding the opening ceremony to gender debates in boxing, and of course, Taiwan's place and performance at this year's Games. There is a lot to talk about, and we will be discussing all this and more with Andrew D. Morris, Executive Director for the Office of Academic Programs and Planning at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, US, and Daniel Yu-Kuei, an Adjunct Assistant Professor at Fujian Catholic University. He's joining us from New Taipei City. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being part of the program on the Olympics. I'm going to start with you, Andrew. What has jumped out at you at this year's Olympics so far?
Well, I would have to say that photo of the surfer may be the best sports photo I've ever seen. So literally jumping out at me, I would say that's number one. The second thing I would say is the really amazing events with the women boxers, including Lin Yu-ting from Taiwan. I don't think we expected to see anything like that, such an intense investigation of gender, and these to see these athletes who trained for years and years and years become some of the best boxers in the world, to get to the Olympics and then have to face this kind of really nasty discussion, and it's been unforgettable, I would say, in a lot of different ways.
And that's definitely something I want to talk about more a little later in the program. But before we go to that, Daniel, what is it about these Olympics that you felt will go down in memory for you?
I think so far the most memorable moment, certainly from the Taiwanese perspective, is the badminton men's double with Yang and Wang Chi-Lin defeating Chinese opponent to win Taiwan's first gold medal in Paris. And I think the story is even more amazing because if we consider that they won the gold medals 3 years ago in Tokyo, they have not been playing well since then, and they had a pretty tough schedule, joined a pretty tough schedule, but basically, throughout the tournament, they're the underdog. But they're able to win every match and win the gold medal. And I think in the final match, we see the arena with probably half of the fans cheering for Taiwan, or they have this Chinese Taipei flag wearing white, and then the other half wearing red with the PRC flag. So that's a pretty spectacular moment for us, seeing them be able to win the gold medal. That's we can say that's the perfect story, at least from the Taiwanese perspective.
And Andrew, for you, you mentioned Lin Yu-ting, but overall, are there any athletes from this year's Olympics that you think will go down in history?
I think on the American side, the women's gymnasts have been just incredible. And so gymnasts like Simone Biles, of course, just further cementing their legacies. But as a fan of Taiwan sports, I really have to say that Lin Yang badminton team was truly amazing. I'd never seen badminton played like that. I didn't know it could be so exciting, so thrilling, so just beautiful to watch. And as Daniel was saying, just to see the crowds just going crazy, the crowd in the Taipei train station and the crowds there in France. I mean, that was really unforgettable to me. I wouldn't have guessed that. I'd have thought that the badminton competition was providing the greatest moments. I hadn't paid that much attention in the past, but that really did it for me this year.
And Daniel, as someone who's followed Taiwan sports carefully and the development of Taiwan sports, why do you think that we managed such a result, or Taiwan managed such a result in badminton at this year's Olympics?
I think it's kind of a surprising story, actually, because as I mentioned that after their gold medal 3 years ago, the pair is actually struggling in a lot of smaller tournaments. And also, we also have to talk about Dai Zilin, probably one of the most beloved athlete on the team. And this is actually her last Olympic event. And even though she's not able to advance past the second round, people are just appreciating what she's able to do, and her achievement, very decorated badminton career. So yeah, badminton being one of the very popular sports, if we're talking about participation, badminton is actually one of the most participated sports. It has much more people playing badminton than probably basketball, and certainly much more than baseball. So it's, when you have a large number of people participating in it, we do tend to see pretty good result in these international competitions.
And Andrew, you mentioned the gender boxing debate, which played out, very disappointingly. But what other aspects of this Olympics do you think could have been done better?
Well, I think, as always, there's the perpetual problem of what to call Taiwan and how to treat Taiwanese fans, who I think simply would love to go to the Olympics and wave their flag just like every other fan of it, every other national team gets to. And so to hear about the stories of Taiwanese fans, children having to, having national flag face paint be scrubbed off their face, and having people with very, very nice looking signs in the shape of Taiwan, and, just the kinds of things that any fan of any national team usually gets to do, and that there's literally one country on earth that whose fans can't do that, and whose fans have to put up with just rude treatment from security, and just it happens. Seems to happen every time. It's not surprising anymore, but it's always truly disappointing.
So Daniel, how is that being viewed here in Taiwan? Are people responding to it in any way, or are people just so used to that kind of a treatment, especially when it comes to these big world games?
I would say when it's come to the term Chinese Taipei, it's been here for some time, right? It's been used for decades. So I would say athletes, fans, sports fans in Taiwan, we're pretty used to that name, Chinese Taipei. We understand that this is the name we have to use in international competitions. This is the only name that's been accepted internationally if we want to participate in Olympics and other elite sports events. That's the case. But also, I think there are more people realizing that how this is a pretty funny or ridiculous way of calling a group of athletes representing a country, right? Because there's really, geographically, there's not really a place called Chinese Taipei. You won't really hear that term outside of international sports, international conventions. People in Taiwan, we don't really use that name. We don't really use that flag, the Chinese Taipei Olympic flag. So I think there are more and more people start to think about how this is a very unfortunate negotiation. We are using this name simply because of the complex history of Taiwan, simply because Beijing's government, they're not allowing us to use any other name that we want to call ourselves.
And so, Andrew, just explain why the rest of the world does pander to this to a certain extent, and in the fact that Taiwan is not allowed to use the name Taiwan, and just explain the circumstances that surround it that make Taiwan in this position where it's given a name that's not necessarily one that people identify with here in their home country.
Yes, well, when the solution was arrived at in 1979, it actually did seem, I would say, like a pretty fair way to get both Chinese Olympic committees into the Olympics. In 1979, you could say that that was a time when there were two different governments who considered themselves to be the rightful government of China, and they considered their Olympic committee to be the rightful Olympic committee to represent China. And so the Olympic formula that allowed China to compete and also Chinese Taipei, at the time, I think you could probably see some logic to it. Obviously, a lot of flaws from the get-go, but there's at least a certain logic to it in the way that it allowed for both, like I said, both governments that considered themselves to represent China to participate. But not too long after that, by the 1990s, fewer and fewer people in Taiwan were really seeing their government, the ROC government, as the rightful government of China. And so by the 1990s, this is already a very dated, inappropriate term to use, but it's one that we're stuck with.
Yeah, so just to follow Dr. Mori's comment about that, so the gold medal match, men's double in badminton, that's a very, very clear example that we see that all the Chinese fans rooting for the Chinese athlete, they're able to wave their national flag. They're able to wave whatever flags they want to wave. But what we cannot see is anything that's not just about the national flag of Taiwan, but any Taiwan-themed flags or banner. That's being banned. So you won't see that in the crowd. We won't see that in the match. We won't see that in the medal ceremony. So I think that's a very, very clear contrast of what we're able to do on the Taiwan side, comparing with the Chinese side, because they're the reason that we're not able to use that. Right, so I think that final match, the ceremony itself, it's a very, very visible example of seeing that difference.
Well, as you both brought up, one of the biggest issues Taiwan faces at international sporting events is its lack of inclusion in world bodies. Taiwan is not part of the United Nations, and only 12 countries have formal diplomatic ties with Taipei. Now, Siobhan Powell takes a look at the nation's rocky relationship with the Olympics through the profiles of 4 pioneering athletes.
Once every 4 years, the Olympics, winter and summer of '52, the International Sports Festival.
In the 128-year history of the Olympics, athletes from Taiwan have competed under 5 different identities: Empire of Japan, the Republic of China, Formosa, Taiwan, and its current name, Chinese Taipei. Over the years, through all these variations and the complications of representation, the country's first Olympian track and field athlete, Zhang Xingqian, fell into relative obscurity. Born in Taichung, Taiwan's second largest city, Zhang Xingqian competed in the 1932 and 1936 Olympics, both times under the Japanese flag and using his Japanese name, Siken Cho. Japan's 50-year colonization of Taiwan would not end until 1945. But Zhang himself failed to win any Olympic medals and was effectively forgotten at home, most prized items turned over to the museum. Because though he competed for Japan and his journal entries were mainly written in Japanese, the athlete was clear about his identity.
他认为他是台湾人，日记里面或者是回忆录里面，他就是认为他自己是台湾人。我觉得就是以他的答案，他说了为准吧，对，而不是别人认为他是哪里人。
In Rome, the Summer Games of the Olympics had athletes of 80 nations taking part.
When Taiwan won its first Olympic medal in the 1960 Rome Games, it was competing as Formosa, a name given by Portuguese colonizers in the 16th century.
C.K. Yang, a California college student, sets a 100-meter decathlon record.
Their star that year, decathlete Yang Wang, who left a mark way beyond the track.
能够在奥运上拿到这个亚军，而且他那个时候去的时候还是中华民国，有奏国歌的嘛，而且是背着中华民国的国旗，所以他就会被当作英雄。
Studied and trained in the US and gained renown as the Iron Man of Asia. To this day, Yang is recognized as the greatest all-around athlete produced by Taiwan.
因为他创造世界纪录的关系呢，国际运动总会再将这个纪录的这种计分再去做修正。那到目前为止，大概全世界新的计分法也大概有3到4位的运动员有超过9000分大关。在左营训练中心的画面啊。
He went on to coach the national team, appeared in Hollywood movies, dabbled in politics, and spent the last 2 decades of his life serving in his hometown as a Taoist priest and shaman. But above all, it's his athletic performance that keeps him an inspiration.
他真的是就是我们的运动 model， 就是最优秀的，最那个他。 那在奥运能要差一点拿到金牌，就是说没有拿到金牌，他那种的成绩也是大家都没办法抵达的，所以这个他真的是非常优秀。那也就是说，给我们后面的运动员的一个指标，大家就朝着这个成绩向前迈进，这样的。
Like Yang. Skier and biathlete Ong Ming-yi also competed in the Olympics, first participating in the 1976 Winter Games in Innsbruck, Austria.
And 1976 Montreal, then is not allowed. Yeah.
It was the last time the Taiwanese flag was displayed at the global event. Taiwan boycotted the 1980 Winter Olympics in Lake Placid and the Summer Games in Moscow. But it wouldn't be pushed off the global stage for long.
开始有议题在讨论改国旗歌的问题，那刚好我就是运动员，我也就在奥会上班，那他们就把这个责任交给我。
It's considered Ong's most notable contribution to his country's Olympic history, designing the flag under which Taiwan has been competing since 1984. Ong carried the flag himself on its debut at the Winter Games in Sarajevo, where Taiwanese athletes began competing as Chinese Taipei.
我们的选手有机会重新返回 奥林匹克运动场，这个就是心理很挣扎，两面的，一个很痛苦，一个很骄傲。
要来上课了。
But it would take another 20 years before a Taiwanese athlete would bring home an Olympic gold.
我没有想过要拿没有名次啦，就是我不想志在参加不在得奖，对，我想要让我自己在奥运会史上留名。
For Taekwondo champion Chen Shih-shin, the path to Athens 2004 was anything but ordinary.
我觉得我自己还蛮会跑的。我有时候在想说，如果跳脱自己是陈诗欣，觉得那个女生还蛮厉害的。
Despite winning a world title at 14, by the age of 16, Chen suffered from burnout. She ran away from home and became a roadside vendor of betel nuts. 3 years later, she returned home and resumed her training.
我觉得我的远大的抱负还没有完成，对，那后来就选择还是回来，因为从小的梦想是踏上奥运的舞台，就觉得心里面好像有个未完成的梦，对，就回来了。
The Taiwanese athlete won the gold for Chinese Taipei. But by whatever name it competes on the world stage, athletes like these will keep doing their people proud, paving a unique historical path, distinct and determined, representing a self-ruled island nation called Taiwan. With Lin Yu-ting, Shubhampal, Connected.
And you can see the full version of that on our YouTube channel and our website. Do check it out. Now, going back to you, Andrew, how do the current geopolitical tensions, we talked about China's influence perhaps on a global stage, but the geopolitical tensions between Taiwan and China, how does that affect Taiwan when competing in these World Games, or does it affect them at all?
It's an interesting question because it's clearly so tense right now. It's really worrying. It's really upsetting to think about what could happen there. But I actually think that there's not much effect when it comes to the Olympics for the reasons that we've been saying, that this system has been in place for so long now, and Taiwan has been constrained for so long now to be only Chinese Taipei, to not be able to use their flags, their national anthem, that it doesn't seem like there's really any difference this time around. Except, as we were saying, I think there is more and more awareness of how strange this exclusion is.
And Daniel, what do you think would happen if Taiwan pushed for a name change and said it wants to represent itself under its own name at, events like the Olympics?
Yeah, so back in 2018, there's a campaign to call for the Chinese Taipei Olympic Committee to change the name from Chinese Taipei to Taiwan. So they held a referendum, but that referendum didn't pass. It failed. I think one of the reasons that people were reluctant to call for a formal change is that it's a really risky decision, right? Because currently we're able to compete internationally using, even though that's the name that we prefer not to use, but at least we are able to participate. But if the formal request is made by the Chinese Taipei Olympic Committee, we don't really know what would happen to the athletes that have always been representing Taiwan using the name Chinese Taipei. It's possible that maybe IOC decided, well, then these athletes, they're not able to represent any country. And of course, there are people, there are athletes using, we have the refugee team that can still compete in the Olympics, but there's no guarantee. There's no guarantee that that would happen to all the Taiwanese athletes who still want to qualify for Olympics and other international events.
Bringing it back to the Games, if you had to take a step back and look at how Taiwan has performed and conducted itself during these Games, what would your assessment be?
I think that we'd have to think about the fact that they will likely win fewer medals than they did in 2021 in Tokyo. And sometimes you'll win more, sometimes you'll win fewer medals. But I think in general, for a relatively small team, I think they've shown themselves to be really great competitors in all the events that they've been part of. I think that they have brought this really interesting cultural element to the Games in these different ways via the Cultural Olympiad, even down to things like the Olympic pins and the pearl milk tea Taiwan Olympic pin that's apparently a really hot item. I think that Taiwan is really doing very well by its image, by its international image. And as we were talking about boxer Lin Yu-ting, I think she's really shown herself to be such a dignified athlete, and to have to put up with so much nastiness from these people around the world, and to keep fighting and to keep winning, I think that's something that I think will live on for a long time, that example that she and the Algerian boxer have also set.
And same question to you, Daniel. To sum it up, we're running out of time here. What would your assessment be of the Team Taiwan, I would say, in this year's Olympics?
I think so far we got 1 gold, at least 4 bronze, right? So that's already better than what we did in 2012 and 2016. And of course, the Tokyo Olympics 3 years ago, in total, we got 12 medals. And I would say that that's a very spectacular feat, and it's probably not going to be a realistic expectation that we're hoping that moving forward, every Olympic we're going to win that many medals. Because I think there are a lot of uncertainties, a lot of random factors that could come into play to decide the result. So I would say, I mean, in addition to talking about medal counts, there are also a lot of other stories that we can pay attention to, like what Andrew talked about, Lin Yu-ting's, the so-called controversy, the discussion about her gender, and she's not backing down. She's still able to win matches, to win medals. So I think that's the story that we can also talk about in addition to the actual medal counts. That of course that's important, but it's these other stories that's also very interesting and inspiring.
Great, thank you both. Unfortunately, we reached the finish line for this episode. Thank you, Andrew D. Morris, for joining us from San Luis Obispo, US, and from New Taipei City, Daniel Yu-Kuei Sun. It's been great to have you both on the program. And for our viewers everywhere, it has been good to have your company. If you've enjoyed today's episode or have anything you'd like to add to the dialogue, do join the conversation on our social media. And remember, stay informed, stay engaged, and stay connected.